If I had a nickel for every time someone's declared Sonic dead, declared that he's back the next day, and resigned to death again a day later, I'd be sad. Yeah, it's kinda crazy how many times Sonic has apparently left and come back from the brink of a series' demise over the years, depending on who you listen to. Squares like me would have you believe there was one dark age that kicked off with Sonic 06 and ended a few years later with games like Sonic Colors. Remember how much people loved that game at first? And then Sonic Generations came along and it's like, no, wait, guys, now he's back. Lost World was okay, and then... But, as we've been told time and again,
we don't need to hear about how Sonic Generations and Sonic Colors are actually pretty good. These are delusions.
So yeah, I guess this means Sonic was still dead all this time, and he finally came back with Sonic Mania, only for forces to kill him again. I wish people would make up their minds already. Sonic Mania is an intense collaborative effort between many old-school Sonic fans who were contracted to make the game. And it wasn't easy. They supposedly met a lot of resistance and needed to prove themselves time and again before being given the okay to make a new classic Sonic game. And even then, they had to make a few compromises at Iizuka's insistence, much to the game's detriment. We'll get to that in a minute. We've got animators you may recognize like the Boxer Hockey guy, programmers who started making fan games, musicians who started making fan remixes, and if you're a longtime Sonic fan, there's a huge probability that you've enjoyed listening to, watching, reading, or playing something by these upstanding gents and you didn't even know it. These are the people who have grown up with Sonic and really understand on a level few in their position can. I don't appreciate how snide onlookers outside the Sonic fanbase were about this initially, like, oh, look at this new low Sonic team is stooping to, letting lowly fans make their games? How unprofessional, what's next? How competently made could a game like this possibly be? But it paid off because, spoiler alert, the game turned out pretty great. I mean, is anyone sincerely surprised that it did? I hope Nintendo is still enjoying not having to dirty their gloves with a lowly fan helping them out with projects. Yeah, you sure showed Microsoft letting them get stuck with this guy, the suckers. Like the ancient parable goes, Sega does what Nintendo don't, and I am eating it up. Sonic Mania has a simple story. At first, Sonic and Tails come to Angel Island to investigate a strange new energy signature, arriving just in time to see a bunch of egg robots dig up it. Okay, you know, Phantom Ruby, explosion of energy, robots upgraded, antagonize you throughout the game. They betray Robotnik at the end because betrayal is a time-honored tradition. The series lets you know Sonic and Tails get warped around from the Ruby, a place like Green Hill, start a speedway, some new zones. Let's face it, you've already heard this like 50 times in other reviews. These zones have nice transitions between them, like emerging from Chemical Plant into Studiopolis through a manhole cover, or warping to the past version to start a speedway only to warp back to the present halfway through the zone. Now, one of the reasons I waited to review Mania Plus was to see how the vanilla version would be updated. Because I rushed to get the Lost World review out as early as I did, it became dated, as the not earning extra lives by collecting rings but I complained about has since been fixed. Similarly, some of the zones in Mania Vanilla didn't boast any transitions to the next stage. But look at that, it's been fixed. So now I don't have to complain about it. Even though that probably would have saved some of the time I just spent jabbering about not having to... At least now the whole affair feels solidly disjointed, almost like a fever dream, which will make some sense in the next game for about a minute. A lot of Sonic nostalgia focuses on the first two games, not really giving Sonic 3 much love, but things are kinda switched around here. We get only one returning stage from Sonic 1, 2 from Sonic 2, 2 from Sonic CD, 3 from Sonic 3 and Knuckles combined, and 4 mostly original stages whipped up just for this game. I would have loved more original stages, but this is one of those compromises I was talking about. Now, legend has it, the lead programmer presented a mock-up of Green Hill made with the retro engine to Iizuka, who loved it. So of course he's like, oh, okay, I got all these ideas for new zones, like a studio, and a printing press, and a techno cathedral, and Iizuka's like, no, slow down there, buddy, let's not go crazy, okay? You can have a couple of original levels, like 1 or 2, but you'd better squeeze Green Hill and Chemical Plant and Oil Ocean in there, because those are my favorites. As if they didn't have enough faith in these guys to make a truly unique Sonic game without screwing it up somehow. So the old zones are kind of there as a safety net. I'm not even sure Mirage Saloon counts, since it's based on a zone that was cut out of Sonic 2. I think 6 original stages and 6 returning ones would have been a better ratio. I'm hoping this game's success gives the higher-ups the confidence to let these guys go all the way with a Mania sequel that consists entirely of brand new original zones. That would be a sight to see. But even as a greatest hit sort of deal, the returning zones have a lot of new ideas and completely original level design to them. The first act of levels like Green Hill consists of all 2 or 3 acts of the original game zone combined since they were so short back then, with a new second act of each zone built from the ground up. And even those Act 1s will have new structures and pathways gluing the more familiar stuff together and fleshing it out. Hydra City is an exception, with Act 1 being the more original and Act 2 playing it straight. Some returning areas almost feel like 2 or 3 zones mashed together, with gimmicks and enemies lifted from completely different stages stages, and even completely different games feeling surprisingly right at home in these zones we never imagined them in. Some of them are even tweaked slightly to be better adapted to their new environment. It's like every zone they liked but couldn't squeeze into the game, they took little bits and bobs, their favorite parts of those zones, and made them flow together beautifully. And amazingly, nothing feels out of place, like why'd they put that there? And I think the new zones they threw in are some of the best the series has ever seen. The amount of content, gimmicks, seamlessly crisscrossing, the layers upon layers of intricate level design contained in these zones show how talented and ambitious these fans were. And I can only imagine what they might create the second Sonic team lets them off their leash. Just go wild! Something I want to point out about 2D Sonic level design is verticality. A common complaint you see lobbed at the classic Sonic games is how you're told to go fast, you want to go fast, but then the levels punish you for going fast by throwing enemies and hazards in your path until after a while you give up on trying to go fast because the game keeps punching you down for it. And I will say this is definitely a valid complaint about Sonic 1. Aside from a couple of areas like Green Hill, the structures tend to be cramped and cluttered, when Sonic should be free. It's got growing pains, you know? First game problems. It can't decide how much it wants to be a platformer or not. Sonic 2 has this issue a little bit, but not nearly as much, though by the time you get to Metropolis, it does start to feel like Sonic 1 again. Sonic CD is a lot more open, but also more scatterbrained, very experimental. But Sonic 3 and Knuckles got something right that I haven't seen done as well again until Mania came along. While there are a few jerkish moments here and there, usually the faster bits are more horizontal and don't have as many hazards to look out for, so you can just let loose in these stretches without worrying about tripping over. But if the entire game was like that, it gets stale after a while. So these areas will often end with a ramp or a jump that perfectly transitions into more vertical platformy gameplay, and these bits tend to be slower, making precision easier. Each gameplay style gives your brain a chance to cool down from the other, and you'll eventually be so used to going back and forth that you'll instinctively shift gears. The key is to mix up the two gameplay styles and not let either go uninterrupted for too long. You see, if you look at most layouts in Sonic 2, you'll see a few paths that occasionally intersect, but mostly go their own way for long stretches. Sometimes the only way to access a lower route is to fall from a higher one, which frames it like you failed to stay on the higher route. But Sonic 3K's maps tend to have a lot more intersections, more opportunities to reach other areas so you're not stuck going one way for long, going up and down and all around. And there really isn't a wrong way to go, which can make some feel lost, but no matter which way you go, you'll be funneled to the end if you just keep going. Some prefer the slightly more linear design, others like me prefer the more ladder, and Mania is chock full of this sort of design, retroactively writing into the old zone's DNA and building beautiful new ones around it. Zones like Studiopolis make the transition so seamless and so frequent that it's hard to see where one thing ends and another begins. They've given Sonic a better flow than he's ever had before, and it's just another reason I hate that they were held back by Sonic Team's stupid mandates. The controls are probably the most important thing about Sonic games. I mean, that goes for any game with precision platforming in it, but doubly so for Sonic. Controlling such a fast character can make or break a game like this, and that's something that people are coming to understand more in recent years. Fans like me used to be dismissed for nitpicking when we'd point out the physics in games like Sonic 4 not feeling right, and the developers of games like that would make up so many excuses for themselves. Remember the ceiling running meme like that wasn't something you could already do in these games? I remember them saying, it's actually harder to make a character roll down a slope with today's technology. What was perfectly doable with a Mega Drive, we simply can't recreate nowadays. Apparently, it wasn't that hard if these guys were able to do it, as belittling as it still sounds. If anything, I think the physics may actually be a bit better than they used to be. Yeah, they didn't stop at trying to replicate the old controls, they may have improved them a little. Or at least that's how it feels to me. I wasn't sure that could be done. I don't need them to be exact, I just want Sonic to move in a way that feels natural that I can use to my advantage. You see, it's not that these games aren't about going fast. It's about you finding ways to go fast, exploiting whatever opportunities you can to reach parts of the environment you wouldn't be able to by just running. Sonic loses momentum when going up inclines, and if you jump up a slope, he will move away from it, not straight up. While this makes perfect sense, I've heard people complain about it because I guess they're still coming to grips with this being a new game that expects you to already have a feel for Sonic's pinball-like movement and take advantage of the physics that are more advanced than average, let's say. Many other platforming characters would just run up the slope without much resistance at all, often at the same speeds they would on a level surface, because those games aren't built around characters that move quite like Sonic does. These 16-bit Sonic games are built sort of like a roller coaster, with lots of slopes, half-pipes, ramps, even the loops can be used to gain more speed. And you can get crazy hang time in places, even just bouncing on enemies or item boxes from a great height and shooting all the way back up. It feels so good to be able to do these things again that you just can't do in a lot of recent Sonic games. It's wonky, sure, and I get that it takes a lot of getting used to, but this is what made Sonic stand out. Some 2D Sonic games that don't quite get this tend to fill in the blanks with fairly generic basic block platforming, homing attack chains, booster chains, spring chains, or on-rail segments that funnel you along just so you feel fast. That's not to say there isn't any automation of this sort or floating block syndrome here, but there's so much more to Mania than that. One thing that's nice about the PC version, DRM aside, is the modding potential. People have already modded palette swaps, sprite animations, sound effects, added moves that weren't in the game, made new assets for the backgrounds, even reverse modded Sonic's newest move, the drop dash, into PC ports of other Sonic games. Someday there'll be a mod of Tails in the Stars like in the bad ending of 8-bit Sonic 2, where he died. There's a mod that removes the water from Hydra City, or just City, I guess. That's hilarious. Point is, the controls inform the level design, and the better the controls are, the better the level design will be in turn. It's all about what you can get away with. You couldn't have Sonic traversing these kinds of environments without him being properly equipped for the journey. That's why in games where he isn't, they put boosters everywhere, just to make sure you'll make it since you probably can't do it under your own power. That's what makes those games broken, and these games on point. The controls are what make it possible for the level design to be action-packed in such an organic, natural-feeling way. The characters' animations are lively and expressive, showing off just how easily these characters in this style lend themselves to traditional animation. And places that may have looked a tad dull or pukey in past games have been color tweaked to be beautiful and almost candy-like. It really brings the life out of them. And the music is stupendous. These arrangements are funky and clean, tasteful, and they seem to get better the more is changed about them. Guitar. But the best tracks, in my opinion, can be found in the new zones. Both mixes of Studiopolis, Press Garden, Mirage Saloon, and Titanic Monarch are on a level of their own, another tier entirely. It's just another glimpse at what could have been had the team been given more freedom. The bosses are great fun. They're not hard per se, but they're imaginative. Playing around a mean beam machine and using Robotnik's Aimmobile against them were some of the highlights for me, and the hard-boiled heavies are exciting in their own right. My only complaint, I guess, is these sort of bosses aren't exactly making the best use of Sonic's abilities, complementing his moveset, you know? But there are still plenty that do, so I don't mind them mixing things up sometimes. I actually appreciate it. I will acknowledge it would have been nice if the bosses had their own tiny third act to themselves, like in Sonic CD. You just walk a little bit, and there the boss is. I can see how facing a boss at the end of an act that may have already given new players a stressful time is frustrating, and not that much would be missing if they made a change like that, or if game overs dropped you at the beginning of an act and not the entire zone. My favorite fight is with Metal Sonic. They've dropped the pretense of it being a race and made it a full-blown chase scene, as Metal pursues you relentlessly and attempts to cut you off. It plays out like a scene in a movie, how many phases there are to it, especially in the new version. That said, while I like his new transformation, I never thought the old version was bad like a lot of people did. I liked him shooting orbs and stomping and rushing you. He was vicious, and I miss those old attacks. I know people hate how long the fight was already, but I honestly wouldn't mind if they kept all the phases and maybe just made the last couple a little shorter. I even like the final boss. Yeah, it's kinda dumb, it's nowhere near as epic as Doomsday Zone, but I like how goofy and hectic it is, seeing Robotnik and Heavy King scrambling to get the ruby like yoink! I like how Supersonic controls, how he jumps from air to land. I like how they handled the rings. I like that they tried something different instead of just doing Doomsday Zone but somehow more epic or less. It's as good a collection of bosses as in any classic Sonic game. They all had some duds. On another note, I love the drop dash move. I wasn't sure how I'd feel about it, but it feels much more in line with how these games play than a boost would. It's become a joke in the community how vanilla and plain Jane Sonic himself is. Tails can fly, Knuckles glides and climbs, Mighty is a powerhouse, Ray is versatile, and all these characters can spin dash. So what makes Sonic special? Why would anyone play as him when they could fly or climb or whatever? Well, Sonic is the only one who can drop dash, which is basically revving up a spin dash mid-air so you just go as soon as you touch the ground. Like spin dashing, it has a trade-off. The spin dash's trade-off is having to stop for a second to build up the speed that hopefully makes up for lost time, or if you're stuck at the bottom of a slope. It's not something to do constantly. You sacrifice precious seconds doing it, so you do it sparingly. The drop dash's trade-off is kind of similar. The terrain needs to be just right to make the most use of it, say at the top of a hill going down. If the terrain isn't ideal, you're not going to get any mileage out of it. It's not like just pressing a button and whooshing effortlessly regardless of terrain. You know, like the boost. That would feel feel out of place in this game, but the drop dash fits well enough. The other characters have similar handicaps to balance out their abilities. Ascending with Tails is nice, but slowly floating down is a pace breaker. Knuckles, for all his tricks, is pretty clunky. He can't run as fast or jump as high as Sonic, and landing after a glide brings him to a complete stop. Mania and Ray are kind of overpowered if you know what you're doing, but they're tricky to really get the hang of. Sonic's drop dash lets him keep up with those other characters, and gives him an edge over them in some situations. He's also the only one who gains the abilities to bounce, air dash, or double jump from the element shields, if that helps. But I also like the additional abilities of the element shields that they cooked up that work for all 5 characters. The lightning shield lets you ride electric currents as if they were solid platforms, the fire shield lights up the oil in Oil Ocean, and the aqua shield lets you walk atop pools of the hazardous blue chemical without getting hurt. And that's in addition to the perks he already had, like clinging to electric ceilings, or walking on fire, or underwater. I don't have much to say about Encore mode. I'll talk about the story in the Sonic Forces review, but I'll cover the gameplay here. Aside from the welcome addition of Angel Island's opening stretch, it isn't too different, but instead of lives, you collect characters. You can have all 5 characters on standby, in other words, 5 lives at any one time, which is a stressful but innovative new challenge that does have its perks. If say one character falls to their death, you won't lose their rings. Those will just be passed on to the next character like it's a marathon run. That's pretty neat. You can switch between 2 characters manually, but if you want to play one of the other 3, you'll need to find a box that switches one or both characters you're playing as with somebody else. There are parts of the levels reworked for Mighty and Ray to be more useful, along with some other changes to the level design and enemy placement. They aren't that different, but different enough, I guess. I'll be honest, I don't care for most of the color changes. I like Green Hill's new lighting enough, I like Oil Ocean with clear skies, I like Stardust Speedway's bad future making the fight with Metal Sonic more dire, but most of these are either pukey looking or barely any different, but somehow still worse. And like I said, the whole ordeal is stressful if things go south. I got stuck with Knuckles and Stardust Speedway and just couldn't reach any boxes to get other characters back. I think I'll stick to Mania mode. Then there's the special stages. Oh my gosh, the special stages. Strewn throughout each level, you'll find many giant rings that act as gateways to the special zone, where you'll have a chance to grab a Chaos Emerald. This is why the main zones are designed to be as open as they are, so they could hide the rings just out of sight and encourage you to look for them, to explore. And these aren't the same stupid old half-pipes they've been using every other game since Sonic 2. They aren't even the Blue Sphere stages from Sonic 3, though those are still in the game for unlockables. These are a brand new mixture of those, Sonic CD's special stages, and Sonic R, I guess. You run on a flat plane chasing a single UFO. Collecting blue spheres increases your speed, and collecting rings increases your time in the stage. Blue spheres will regenerate on each lap, but rings won't. I prioritize increasing my speed at least 1 level, then extending my time as much as I can while I close the gap between myself and the UFO. There's a ton of shortcuts, and even some splits in the track where one way will give you more goodies. I have more fun in these special stages than those of any other Sonic game, really. Still, there is one weird thing I want to point out. You know how in a lot of Sonic games you'd expect the last couple of special stages to be the hardest, but usually the 4th or 5th is because of some bullcrap reason, and you get stuck on those forever? You fall over and over until you have to start a whole new playthrough because you run out of opportunities, and then 6 and 7 end up being super easy, and you beat those in like 1 or 2 tries? Yeah, that happens in this game too. I guess it's tradition. And yes, Encore mode changes the locations of the giant rings and gives you 7 new special stages, and I haven't beaten a single one. Encore mode aside, I love basically everything about the main game, but it's not perfect. Some of ye old hang-ups still carried over from the old games. Just tiny, persistent little annoyances that can easily be brushed off, but aside from possibly the final stage, I didn't find myself tripping up in any of the original stages. It's mostly things they had to bring back from the old ones. Flying Battery is a good example. There's a lot of waiting for things in this stage that pads it out. Then there's a complaint about lives. I was surprised to hear just how vehemently against games including a live system some people are, saying it's inexcusable and that they refuse to play any game that is a live system because the pressure of not getting a game over stressed them out bad enough to make the game unbearable. I don't relate to that, and I do find it kinda petty to be that bothered by it that it could break an otherwise great game. It's weird though, because in some ways, Sonic games are super easy. You only need 1 ring to survive most things after all, and there are thousands to get, but in another sense are super hard because they're so unlike any other platformer that people are used to playing. The sad thing is, not everybody is going to have a good time playing a Sonic game. Maybe the first couple levels where they can just go fast and not think much about what they're doing, but eventually you'll hear the same tired complaints complaints like the human brain can't react in time, even with the added widescreen that for longtime players like me makes a world of difference. Some players get motion sickness, some are distracted by the 10-minute timer pressuring them to the end, even though you can turn the timer off. I do acknowledge that these can be problems to what feels like an incredibly small degree. Maybe to other people these problems are too big to work around, and I feel kinda bad just saying welcome to Sonic or get good. It's given me pause as I rethink what Sonic is. Like I said, there's a common misconception about that, and I mainly blame the way the character's been marketed over the years. People think Sonic is about blinding breakneck speeds all the time, no stopping for anything, and then they hit the slower parts of a Sonic game and they wince like, what? What is this crap? I wanted to keep going fast. Why is the game making me go less fast for a few seconds? To paraphrase Roger, Sonic games are kinda like a ballet. You'll have intense moments where the dancer goes all out, but they aren't just flailing about constantly. They slow down here and there to punctuate their grander movements, build them up, make them stand out, give us a chance to catch our breath. The key is that while they may slow down, they never stop moving completely. They're always doing something, even if it's minimal, just before the next sudden explosion of movement. That's how I think Sonic stages flow at their best. Just running down a corridor forever would get boring. But to be fair, that's exactly what some people want. That's what they've always wanted Sonic to be, ever since they saw those stupid misleading commercials dating as far back as the beginning. I can't count the times I've seen people say they had more fun playing Sonic Dash than any mainstream home console Sonic game, even saying that this is how Sonic should ideally play, that they should just ditch all the cumbersome platforming arcadey stuff that bogs Sonic down and make him an endless runner already. Go all the way, just roll with that. Personally, I find this stance repugnant. I'm sincerely glad there is a place for games like that for those who do enjoy Sonic that way. Stuff like Sonic Runners. Just please don't make that all there is. Don't take this away. Don't reduce all it could be to just that. Thankfully, Sonic Team and Sega don't seem interested in going that far. They've recognized that there are two markets for Sonic, so they make games like that for the people who want those, and traditional, arguably dated games like this for diehards like me. And as long as things stay that way, I'm good. It's more of an issue of consistency. Some people just don't see any merit in blending speed, platforming, and exploration elements in the same game. I think that those elements shine far brighter individually than they ever can together. The Sonic would work better as just a racer, or just a slower platformer, or just an open world game. Not 2 or 3 of these games at the same time, as you just get a game that isn't particularly good at being any of these things. A master of none, you could say. A game that just can't decide what it wants to be. And for reasons I've stated in the past, I've never really understood this view. I was drawn to Sonic because it's unconventional, because it's more flexible than a rhythm game, more kinetic than the average platformer, more open than a racing game, and more focused than a Metroidvania. I think it takes some of the best qualities, not the worst, of various genres and makes them something that's always surprising. And for all the things it has going on, this is the most consistently entertaining and replayable Sonic game in years. Like it or not, Sonic is an arcade game at heart. I know this is a weird thing to say in this day and age, as arcade games have grown a reputation for being malicious, unfairly killing players to devour more of their quarters, but the point of a Sonic game is to play it over and over. Not because you couldn't beat it the first time, but because you want to look cooler beating it the second time, learning the lay of the land and doing a little bit better each run until you have it down to a science. The thrill doesn't come from simply beating the game, but looking good while you beat the game, doing it with style. This is why many recent Sonic games have a ranking system that judges your performance based on how quickly you beat the stage and how many points or rings you manage to nab on the way to the end. Even the exploration aspect feeds into this. On top of the joy of finding more rings, shields, and emeralds, another reason to explore and repeat playthroughs is to find quicker, more optimal routes to the goal until you've laid out one that you may decide is your favorite and aim for that route in subsequent plays. Of course, you're not always going to get an S rank on your first try jumping into a new Sonic game you've never played before, but hey, it's not like you only ever plan to play the game one time to put it down and never touch it again, right? Unless you're a career reviewer who has to plow through like 10 games in a month, in which case that need for instant gratification and smaller games like this not demanding that much of your time is kind of understandable. But that's the thing, most Sonic games weren't designed to only be played once before you move on to the next game. They're designed to slap you in the face and demand satisfaction, goading you to meet their challenge, a design philosophy that has been brought into question more and more by critics of games like Cuphead. I admit, I'm biased. I'm coming from a place where these problems some people say are game-breaking stopped being problems for me a long time ago, and that's why I'm able to enjoy Sonic games as much as I do. And I get the feeling that a lot of you viewers, those who are accustomed to how differently Sonic games typically play, are in that same boat. Maybe we're not sensitive enough to people who just can't have fun playing Sonic because its ideas are completely antithetical to everything they've ever been taught to believe is good game design. But as much of a cop-out as this may be, the appeal of Sonic, as I expressed in the later parts of my Adventure 1 and 2 re-review, what makes it so engaging, cracks and all, is that it doesn't adhere to the strict rules set by other series. That's not the bug for us, that's the feature. That's a good thing. Sonic games tend to go their own way. That's a pretty radical departure from the norm. And things that may not work at all if implemented in those other games are just part of what makes this series so addicting. Patronize us all you want. Keep joking that we're masochists for enjoying things we shouldn't, or we're never good, that we should know better. We'll continue bouncing crazy high. But I do agree that the only things holding this game back may well be its roots. My biggest issue is the top billing the old zones got. As good as they are and as many new bells and whistles have been added to them, it's generally these areas that have the most slip-ups. And it's by design, that's just how they always were. Nobody was asking for Green Hill and Chemical Plant to come back again, aside from Izuka. Anyone's saying, you just wanted the old stuff, that's what you were asking for all along. No, we just want a new game in that style. A new game that was at least as good as those old ones, not the same. One of the major complaints about Sonic 4 back in the day, both episodes, was that the levels were all rehashes of previous stage themes. And, well, this is the game Sonic 4 wanted to be. What it utterly failed to be. And here it is. We have it now. Why was this so hard? Why did it take almost a decade? Why weren't the crew at Sonic Team, the professionals, able to release something of this quality back in, what was it, 2009? 10? It feels so long ago now. Mania does have a lot of what we wanted, but it's still held back by the returning zones, among other things. The new zones, at times, feel almost flawless. I even like Titanic Monarch, and really, that's the best complaint you could ever make about a game. That the best parts of it are all new, and the only things holding it back in any way are the old parts that they were forced to include. We can't blame the team for this. They did their best with what they were permitted to work with. For the longest time, since my oldest reviews that really don't hold up, Sonic 3 and Knuckles combined, or Sonic 3K as I like to call it, was my favorite 2D Sonic game, and the adventure titles have been my favorite 3D games, mostly for Sonic's gameplay, with Generations right up there for its expansive yet cohesive level design. However, I think I'm ready to dethrone Sonic 3K and declare this my new favorite Sonic game. It's about as long as Sonic 3K, has less bullcrap, and so much content to enjoy, new and old. It's just the best package all around. But about those compromises, there was one other condition, one other thing Izuka really wanted to accomplish with this game, and if you beat it with all the emeralds in hand... Great Scott! Hey everyone, thank you for sticking around this long. About time I reviewed a Sonic game again, huh? Sorry for waiting a year to make this video. I was dreading this one, but I hope it was worth it. The wait for Sonic Forces won't be anywhere near this long, I promise. Shoutouts to Stoken, King K, and Radical Soda. They've all reviewed this game and even covered some things I couldn't find the words for. I just don't have as much time for cranking out this sort of content as I did a few years ago. If you want to support my work, please consider my graphic novel series Planet Ripple. You can buy the books on Amazon or read an old draft of the first volume for free. Links to everything in the description, and please share this video with anyone who may have missed it. Anyone feeling nostalgic who's been waiting for me to finally get around to it. Thanks for watching. Toodles!